Chalk Talk is brought to you by Isolite, the emergency lighting experts. Stay educated, my friends.
Learning is like rowing upstream. To not advance is to drop back. Good morning and good afternoon, everybody. I'm Evan Ackman, the Director of Product Development. I'm joined here by Matt and Greg, our Regional Sales Manager. And I'm so glad that you've decided to spend 15 minutes here with us today on this Chalk Talk, learning to row upstream. As you can see on your screen right now, we're going to be talking about what's new with the E3MAC, our modular series of inverters. I want to talk about what's new in the E3MAC because we've actually done a lot of stuff recently over the last couple months, and we're sort of right on the cusp of releasing a bunch of new options and sort of, let's say, features or flexibilities that we've added to the product line. And I'd like to really talk about three things: some minor changes, some of that's documentation, some of it's just tweaks to some options. I want to talk about a new battery thermal management system, which is pretty exciting. I want to talk about some new cabinet options that we have that we can deploy for various different reasons. And the way that I want to talk about these is in our traditional 3-act play. So I want to start with what these things are explicitly, kind of just nuts and bolts, what they are, how they go together. I then want to go into sort of the what can they do for you, how does it impact you and your customers. Then I want to end with nomenclature, sales tools, when this stuff will be available, and just talk about how you make sure that you're sort of getting these products and these options when you order your E3MACs. Without further ado, let's jump right in. Now, I said we were going to start with some minor changes, and these are minor, but I think they're very important. The first of which is documentation. Maybe 18 months ago, when we went and redid and rebranded all of our cut sheets, we took the opportunity to kind of trim some of the fat out of them. I think we went a little bit too far on the E3MAC cut sheets, frankly. We've actually gone back, added a bunch of extra information into it. So all the weights, all of the electrical properties, including things like the upstream output breakers, what our input breaker looks like, what the maximum current is, parameters about the batteries, not just how many there are, but how many gallons of electrolyte are in there. And then additionally, we've also listed explicitly what the cabinets will look like when you get them. We've said sort of historically that we have like these 6 or 7 cabinet options, but we didn't do a good job of telling you exactly which one was going to show up by wattage. And so we've gone and we've amended all that. I think everything that you would ever need is now in that document. But if you do see something that's missing that is relevant to you or your customers, please let me know. I'm really committed to getting this right and making sure that we're making these very useful. Now, moving over to sort of product-y stuff, we've added some flexibility to some existing options. We've always had a maintenance bypass switch. Historically, it's been a make before break contact, which means that the outputs never go away. So it sort of connects the output breakers to the input feed before it disconnects anything. And that services 99% of the customers out there. But we've actually had a lot of requests recently for a break before make option. I'll be honest, I don't totally understand the application, but it does show up in specs. And so we've added that as an option and a flexibility that we can do on our maintenance bypass switches. I don't think you want to make this your go-to option when you need a maintenance bypass, because there is a bit of a cost premium associated with it. But if it comes up in a spec, we can certainly do it now. The other thing, and even a little bit more minor and maybe a little bit more rare, is an emergency power off. You can think of this as like the big red smash here to turn everything off button that's mounted externally to the inverter. It's come up on a couple specs, and so we now have that as an option for the product that we can furnish. Another thing that's been sort of a thorn in our side for a while is we've had a big gap in our offering between 5,000 VA and 8,000 VA on the 3-phase inverters. We had a number of quotes pop up where it needed something in between. And so an 8K was a little bit too expensive and a 5K didn't have enough horsepower to do it. So we've gone and added a 6K VA option to the inverter lineup for 3-phase systems. So now that's in there. It's a more cost-effective way to do that intermediate power level. And 6K VA actually is sort of a sweet spot for us. We see a lot of quotes and a lot of jobs using that size inverter. So that's kind of a big deal. The other thing is a firmware update that we've made under the hood. If you've been on my Chalk Talks regarding the E3MAC, you've heard me talk about the impact of smart power packs that have UL 924 ratings. And the way they operate is they actually need to see an absence of power so that they can go into their override mode. We've always had the flexibility to change the transfer time on the E3MAC. So by default, it's that super quick 2 millisecond transfer. We've allowed for it to go up to 1 second, but we've actually changed the firmware recently to allow you to extend that further to 2 seconds. That brings parity across the line. So there are a couple power packs out there that state that you need longer than 1 second gaps in power for them to operate in the proper way. This now allows these products to be compatible and just work natively with those power packs. So you never have to worry about getting caught for something like that. Now, moving into maybe bigger deal kind of features, the first of which is our new battery thermal management system. And this allows for the monitoring of every battery in an inverter-based system. So if you have an 18 kVA inverter and you've got whatever that number of batteries is, 25 or 30 or something, this will actually monitor each and every battery. It sort of monitors every other one. The way it does that is there's this box that you can see on your screen right now that gets stuffed in the inverter cabinet, and then you can see the connections on the bottom. Those wire to the bus bars between every other set of batteries, and then that means that that bus bar is coupled to 2 batteries. That allows us to actually get information about every battery in the system. It still uses the existing thermal alarm as the summarization of this. So you're still going to get one thermal alarm, but now it's just going to be coupled more directly to each individual battery. And this is one of those things that the contractor is going to have to wire in the field. We've made that pretty easy, though. I will say that there are a lot of wires, so it will take a little bit of time to get it done, but it's not too bad. They got to wire the bus bars anyway. It just has a little wire whip that they have to dress up through back to this system. There's a lot of reasons why people might use this. We're going to talk about that in 2 slides. I want to just introduce the other new thing that's come to the E3MAC line first. And that's a new cabinet design. This is not replacing anything. This is a totally new offering that we have that we're going to use in a number of different ways. It's actually based off of a thing that we've done as a custom for a long period of time. This sort of section back here, on the bottom, we used to be able to make this as a separate cabinet that could then get bolted to the top of our large inverter cabinets. What we've done is we've actually made this an all-in-one, big, tall, 75-inch tall cabinet that's sort of an all-in-one. And there's a lot of flexibility that's baked into this. So you see this little nose piece here. This actually can be big door up top, small door on the bottom like you see here, or it can be swapped so that you get small door on top, big door on bottom. In addition to that, we actually have the flexibility of having, a totally blank face here so that this could just be a large battery enclosure. We have the flexibility to add breaker holes here so you could make this an additional breaker section, or really any and all combinations of those. Again, we'll talk about exactly where this thing gets used and the customer benefits in 2 slides, but the idea here is that it brings us a lot of flexibility. It's got the same footprint as our existing large cabinets. It's just taller, which is going to give us a lot of flexibility. In terms of the customer impact, I think it's important to mention when we're talking about this battery thermal management thing, all of our inverters, ever since we released the E3MAC line, whatever it was, 10 years ago or something, it's always had thermal protection. We have to have that. One, we want it for safety reasons, but UL makes sure that we have it as well. So we always have thermal protection in the inverters. What this does is just increases the granularity of what you're measuring. So instead of just relying on the overall enclosure temperature to rise in the event of a fault, this actually couples directly to the batteries. And so it'll react more quickly and more directly to a thermal event that happens, on the battery, like in the bottom of the cabinet. And this, I don't think, is going to be the standard offering. I don't think it's going to go on every job, but there do exist specs out there for certain types of jobs where it'll say in there that you need to have like positive confirmed thermal management of each individual battery. And previously we've had to take exception to that by just saying that we have a thermal management system that is coupled to the enclosure, which is a surrogate for all the batteries. This allows us to just directly meet it and say, yes, we are coupled to every battery. We can meet that spec. Let's move on. High fives and attaboys. So if it comes up in a spec, we can do it. I don't know that you're going to want to do this for every job. It does make a little bit more work for the contractor. It does come at a bit of a cost premium, but it's there if you need it. The multifunction cabinet has a lot of arms and legs for us. And one of the things that we've had trouble furnishing in the past are things like mixed input and output voltages. And maybe more particularly like just mixed output voltages. So 120 volts in, but you need 120 and 277 on the output. That for us historically has involved an additional enclosure, which is not great because it takes up a lot of floor space for something that doesn't feel like it deserves that amount of value. What this does is it allows us to do things like that, as well as a number of other different things. Another good example is circuit breakers. Our large cabinets support 24 circuit breakers, but no matter what that number is, someone finds some reason to need one more than that. I'm confident if we said we had 1,000 breaker slots, the first job that came in would be for 1,001. But this actually allows us to double our circuit breaker capacity. Another thing that people ask for is integrating those UL924 ELCD devices directly in the cabinet. We can do that. Things like more triple arms, additional battery capacity for any given size inverter. We can now do that kind of thing on this platform and not increase floor space. So that's super exciting. The other thing that has been a hot button, and this allows us to sort of resolve, is the move to sort of a less floor space at the cost of height type design. So we can actually go from a system that used to take 2 enclosures and then bring it down to 1 multifunction cabinet. So you can see like an 8 kVA system here with the two enclosures necessary there on the left. That can now be furnished on 1 system or 1 enclosure that's taller, but it has the same floor space requirement as 1. And we could do the same thing going from 3 to 2. So you can save like a 35 by 23 inch space on the floor with this new cabinet design. So that's pretty exciting. It gives us a lot of flexibility. In terms of nomenclature and ordering information, what you're going to see on the cut sheets for the battery thermal management system is an option called BTMS. It'll be available on every inverter size, regardless of phasing or capacity. You'll also notice when you get those quotes that there's going to be some tiered pricing associated with it. It's not always going to be the same price for that option. It's a pretty cost-effective way, especially if you consider what our competitors are doing. We broke it down into like 4 different tiers. That's just based off of the number of batteries. The bus bars and the thermocouples and the whips are actually pretty expensive. So there is a real cost difference when you go to more batteries, even though the box is the same every time. So it doesn't vary wildly, but there is a little bit of a tiered pricing structure. And you can get this quoted now. We'll be able to ship these things in July. A little bit more nuanced story on the multifunction cabinets. When you're doing it for those reasons of flexibility, and let's just say that the space on the floor is not the primary concern. So the things I was talking about, like additional circuit breakers, the mixed voltages, you're not going to have to specify anything in the model number. Those options are just going to imply that you always need one of these tall multifunction cabinets. But when you're doing it for floor space reasons, or when you're ordering something that could be furnished as 2 enclosures next to each other or 1 single tall enclosure, what we're adding to the cut sheet is this -AE option, and AE stands for alternate enclosure. And what that will be is the clue that you're not going to do the 2 wide, you're actually going to go with the alternate enclosure, which is the single tall enclosure. And that option will come at 0 cost. It'll be a wash. It's the same amount of metal basically. So it's up to your preference and the preference for the job which you get. And we can quote these things now. We've actually started shipping some for some of the reasons I mentioned before. But in general, we're going to make this available for shipment in August for those sort of personal preference type reasons. That said, the spec sheets are not quite up to date yet. We're still finalizing all the drawings so that we can make it nice and clear and concise for you. As I mentioned, we're trying to do a good job on those E3MAC cut sheets. So those will be updated soon with the new multifunction cabinets as well as the BTMS option. The other thing that we're going to be posting in the next week or so is a dedicated cell sheet on the BTMS feature. Reason being is I do think it's worth having some common talking points that we're all using, just to be clear that everything is thermally protected, even if you don't select this option. This is what you get over and above and beyond when you select this option. So that cell sheet will be sort of marketing and communication focused. That'll go up when we update the cut sheets. And then as always, the presentation is going to be available. We'll send it to you in a week or so when we get the videos all up. There'll be a video of me giving it, as well as you can see the slides again. So if you want to give this to your internal customers or some of your customers, we can certainly allow you to do that. It'll be sitting on our webpage. With that said, as I mentioned, I'm Evan Ackman. Greg and Matt actually had to run a little bit early, but if there's anything that we can ever do for you, if you want to talk more about these new cabinets, you want to talk about the thermal management, you want to talk about cut sheets, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. We appreciate everything you do for us. Anything that we can do to support you, we're happy to do. So please don't hesitate. You have our contact information. We're here for you. Thank you so much.